Warning: this book is the fourth installment in the Meg series and will contain spoilers for the previous 3 entries. If you haven't seen the videos reviewing them, check the description for links, or better yet, read the books for yourself. I've always described the Meg series as stupid but fun, but with Hell's Aquarium, the 4th installment, the books are starting to show their age. I'm sure I've been lenient in judging these books before, since they're all the literary equivalent of a dumb popcorn movie. They entertain me well enough, and sometimes that's all I need. All the same, author Steve Alden did pretty well getting as far as he did with the premise, and to my understanding, there is one more book after this called Night Stalkers. Hell's Aquarium begins several years after the last book, in which time protagonist Jonas Taylor and his family have done very well for themselves. They own and operate the Tanaka Institute Aquarium, which houses Angel, the gigantic megalodon shark, along with her 5 pups. They've also had lots of success in developing a new type of submersible, which Taylor's son David is an expert in piloting. However, an accident that kills one of their staff members and Angel's erratic behavior greatly worries Taylor. Tired of the accidents and of death, and with mounting pressure from an eco-terrorist group known as RAW, Release Animals to the Wild, Jonas decides that it might be time to do something about the giant shark that he truly hates. But it's not all grim news. An eccentric Saudi prince offers to buy 2 of the pups for his private aquarium, as well as several of the new model submersibles. He even offers David a job in training a handful of pilots in Saudi Arabia. Taylor is hesitant, but since David won't be going into the Marianas Trench, he eventually relents. But shock of all shocks, the prince is not as honest as he might have seemed. What secrets is he holding in his aquarium? And why does he need all these deep-sea divers and submersibles? While we do get the same standard action tropes that we've seen in the other books, it's their overuse that does the book a disservice. We've seen these scenes before and we know what to expect from them, so there are very few surprises to be had. Now, there are some twists and sudden reveals that you might not see coming, but you need to wait a long while for them to show up. Taylor sadly has been watered down from his old self instead of being built up from his past adventures. Taylor's always felt reeled in just enough so that he didn't come off as a full-blown action hero, unlike what he appears to be in the upcoming movie, but he's definitely crossed that line in this book. After a while, the close calls, the narrow shaves, all seem artificial, like he's never really in danger of dying. Oh no! Taylor fell into the pool with Angel and his feet are trapped in a grate. But don't worry, his buddy Mac just happens to have a harpoon gun on a helicopter and is able to pull Taylor to safety. Despite that complaint, those repetitive action scenes aren't terribly prevalent. Most of the action we've gotten used to have been replaced with build-up for the climax very early on, or drama between characters, which is not Alton's specialty. He can get it right on a superficial level, but when most of that focuses on David, I start to waver a bit. David isn't an awful character, but he does come off as egotistical and kind of up his own ass. He's the best submersible pilot on the planet, maybe second to his father, and he knows it, taking every chance he can to show off how good he is. He's not actively annoying, but his arrogance does get a little grating now and then. Fortunately, he does occasionally get punished for it, so he doesn't come off as completely detestable. Throw in an obligatory love interest whose name I've already forgotten, and his typical boyhood into manhood storyline is properly rounded out. One element that was missing from this particular book was the occasional cutaway. I always enjoyed the small scenes in the previous books where a Meg was on the loose in the ocean and would attack random people, but we couldn't tell going in if those people would live or die. Those scenes are largely removed from the book and have been replaced with a side story about RAW, the dishonest, scheming animal rights group dedicated to destroying the Tanaka Institute's reputation and, almost as importantly, releasing the megalodons into the wild, despite the mountains of evidence of why that's a terrible idea. While I did like the plotline with them, it was pretty obvious on how things were going to end. So much so that you've probably come up with the answer yourself already. Now, it might seem like I'm being really critical of the book, and maybe I am, but there are some good bits later in the book that I did enjoy, mostly around the climax. And that means spoilers, so if you want to read this for yourself later, skip to this time to jump to the rating. The climax is where I started to really enjoy the book again. It took several elements from the previous books and threw them all together here. It turns out that the bad guy from the previous book, Michael Marin, had discovered an underwater haven of prehistoric life even more dangerous than the Marianas Trench, but died before he could dramatically reveal it to the world. Well, the Saudi prince has David and his deep-sea divers try to collect some of the underwater monsters from this area, which leads to David and his obligatory love interest getting trapped in an underwater lab 34,000 feet under the ocean. Just imagining this entire event really triggered my fear of the deep sea and really brought the thrills home for me. Perhaps that was what made the book drag for me so much beforehand, just because of how much time was spent out of the water. If thalassophobia is why I enjoy this series so much, then keep it in the water. Overall, while the book does have problems and doesn't shine as well as previous entries, there was still plenty to enjoy. The characters aren't bad and do manage to keep you rooting for them, but you do have to wait a while for the action to really pick up. But once it does, it is pretty good, though you will need to exercise plenty of suspension of disbelief. Meg, Hell's Aquarium is pretty good. Not a bad time to be had for sure. So, have you read the book? What did you think? If not, do you want to read it now? Whatever your thoughts, comment below and stay tuned for more.